Chapter 15. In Search of Hope. You have to admit it, Onion. Our days deep underground never would have prepared us for such a sight as this. It had only been about 30 minutes since leaving the Steel Guardian outpost, but with me constantly stopping to look back, we hadn't made much headway. The Burrow wasn't exactly what you would call a tourist attraction. Metal walls, pipes, and conduit of all shapes and sizes zigzagging to and fro, and nary a spectacle to behold. When I was younger, my mother would spend her free time showing me all the nooks and crannies within the Burrow, and at the time I was very excited to see all these things. I remember spending days in the power room, annoying the technicians with all sorts of questions about how everything worked and how after 200 years it still managed to keep the entire place powered. After the power station lost its interest, I turned my sights to the gardens, where all of our food was grown, and how even without a light source or fresh water they still managed to sustain us. But after a while even that too became boring. Every time I found something new and exciting, it was simply a short-lived excitement. When your entire world is stagnant, it's hard to remain excited about anything. And that's why I love to build and tinker. Making something out of nothing kept my imagination and desires fulfilled. Out here, however, was a completely different story. Sure, the majority of what I had seen had been destruction and desolation, but there were still new things, unfamiliar things to keep me going. Those towering trees in the distance, they were beautiful. I remember reading about the pre-war ecology of Zootopia, how it was divided into districts to help mammals of all different backgrounds thrive. Based upon the terrain, we were currently in Savannah Central, so that meant behind us was the Rainforest District. Being underground for such a long time really does mess with one's perception of space. Nearly all the trees I had seen were jutting far into the clouds overhead. I nearly fell trying to walk backwards so I traced one of them up as far as I could. It was at least a mile or two away, if not more, but part of me wanted to forget everything and just go there. Imagine it towering over the entire world, getting to see everything it had to offer. But every time I got lost in my own imagination, reality came knocking. And by reality, I meant Onion.
Miss, you should really stop daydreaming and concentrate on the road ahead. Quite literally, if I may say so.
Yeah, I'm watching. I tripped over something hard and fell ass first onto the cracked pavement. My step. Ow.
I told you, miss.
Fine, I'll make sure to keep my eyes on... Hey, what's that? I was craning my head back while talking to Onion when I noticed something in the distance. It was a large building that stood out from the rest due to its shape. While most of the other buildings seemed to have hard edges and appeared to have grown around the other smaller buildings, this one looked a lot more organic. I couldn't make out all the small details, but it was a large tower, and flowing arches that appeared over the road made it stick out. I could see a large chain fence that divided the road from whatever that building was, but time had deteriorated it, leaving large gaps in the fence.
I am not sure, miss. It does stand out from the rest of the architecture.
Well, it's not far, and it is on the way. So let's take a look, shall we?
Just as long as you promise to be careful, miss. I am very wary of buildings at the moment. With the exception of those friendly Steel Guardians, nothing good has come of one.
Well, maybe we'll be the ones to ambush for once, instead of the other way around.
I would rather avoid any conflict entirely, miss. I'm sure that the Steel Guardians' good graces extend only as far as their medical supplies.
It'll be fine. Plus, like I said, we have to pass it anyway, so we might as well. I picked myself up off the ground. Beside me was the source of my newfound ass pain, a long metal pole. From the look of it, it must have been a sign holder placed alongside the road we were on. But the sign was long since gone. I dusted myself off, a bit pointless since I'm just going to get dirty again soon, and we set off in the direction of the building. I had no idea where I was in relation to the theater where I rescued Laszlo. Sure, my Pip-Boy showed me the distance between there and here, but there was so much that I had missed. And the fact that one moment I was in an area of the city densely populated with buildings, and the next moment I was in a section of the city where the roads outnumbered the buildings. It was a bit disorienting for my brain. Or maybe it was the fact that I was unconscious for a week. Actually, I'm sure that's it. This area was not like Highway 21. The roads were fairly flat, with the occasional diverting road leading into or away from the city. Here, however, things were on a much more massive scale. The road we were on was one of many. We were on one of relatively ground level, but there were roads that towered above us, crisscrossing here and there. I saw large ramps merging onto two roads in the distance, while another one split into two, each heading in their own direction. As we passed under one of the skyward roads, I kept a good eye on it. From everything that I've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if some kind of winged creature would swoop down, grab me, and feed me to its starving babies. Of course, now that I'm thinking of that, I bet fate is going to try to conjure up that very scene. I hit the side of my head. Fate was not in charge of me. I am.
Are you all right, miss?
Just trying to stop thinking about things that I shouldn't be thinking about.
I'm surprised you don't hit yourself more often then, miss.
Hardy har har, you're so funny, Onion. I suddenly doubted myself for a moment and took a look at my Pip-Boy. There didn't appear to be any blips on the sensors apart from Onion. Hope was still a good distance from us, but it looked like a fairly straight shot. If we were lucky, we might get there before nightfall, but I highly doubt it. It was already nearing 3 in the afternoon, and I would have to stop and eat something at some point. Thankfully, we had plenty of provisions, and it's a good thing that robots don't need to eat. Any extra mouths would rapidly diminish the food, and apart from scavenging, we really haven't found any reliable sources of nutrition.
Nothing on sensors, miss. For once, I think we are in the clear.
We were within 20 feet of the chain fence that formed a wall on the side of the road. It seemed much further before. I must have gotten lost in thought again. Glad Onion was on the watch. Otherwise, I would have made a perfect target for someone or something. I walked up to the edge of the road where the section of fence had collapsed. We were much further up than I had thought. There was about a 15 or so foot drop down to where another road connected the building to which was now in full view. The tower was attached to a large midsection. That itself was angsted by a smaller section on either side. The smaller sections were connected by 2 large arches, serving both as a roof and as a decoration. The metal it was composed of had long since turned dull and gray, but the design itself was still mesmerizing. Small lines and arches connected between the large one and the roof of the central section. There was a large sign attached to the base of the middle section. It read, Grass Street Station.
My records show that this was one of many public transportation stations that was accessible throughout the city. This station featured a rapid transit train that ferried mammals between stations on connecting lines. I highly doubt this mode of transportation is still operational today.
Oh, that's a shame. Be nice to take a ride and enjoy the view while heading towards our destination. You don't by chance have any information on where this station connects to, do you?
Unfortunately, I do not, miss. I only have access to historical data, not practical data in regards to transit lines.
Well, maybe there'll be something useful down there. Now, how do I get down there without breaking my legs again? I wasn't afraid of heights, at least not that I knew of, but my brain was having trouble figuring out exactly how high this was. At first it looked to be about 15 feet or so, but now my head was saying it was farther, and with what looked like a solid concrete below, I didn't want to risk it. I took a step back so that I could safely consider my options. I could have Onion float down there and take some sort of measurement, tell me the likelihood of me surviving a fall. But even if it was only 5 feet, he would insist it was too dangerous.
Miss?
Not now, Onion, I'm trying to think. I could try to fashion a chain rope from the fence and use it to climb down, but I didn't have anything I could use to cut the chain with ease.
Miss, if you would...
Give me a moment. I'm trying to figure out how to get down there safely.
But, miss, that...
Hush. Too bad I didn't think of taking that whip from that bitch Bailey. But then again, I was too busy being unconscious to think about that. It would have made a good climbing tool. First chance I get, I should try to obtain some rope for times like this. Or if I fall into another sinkhole. Or if I need to scale a building, or... Whoa. I really should have thought about packing some rope when I left the burrow. Hey, Onion, remind me to get some rope when we have the chance. Onion?
Down here, miss.
I looked towards where his voice had originated from. He was directly below me on the ground. What are you doing down there? I'm trying to think of a way for me to get down there safely. Got any ideas?
How about the stairs, miss?
I'm such an idiot sometimes. All this time I was trying to figure out some crafty way to get me down there. I never once thought to see if there was some logical way to descend this height. Like some stairs. About 10 feet to the right of me was a break in the fence. A deliberate break that connected to the side of the road I was standing on, to the ground. I smacked my forehead with my paw. Way to overthink the situation, Olivia. The steps were in fairly good condition. The metal was holding up a lot better than the concrete structures nearby. Once I reached the ground, the station looked much larger while staring up at it. A road led up to the building where there was an arched awning that covered a walkway that led up to 2 large double doors. I could tell that this station was designed for mammals of all shapes and sizes. I slowly walked the length of the building, checking my sensors for any potential threats. Thankfully, nothing was showing up. But then again, the sensors only detected movement. So for all I knew, there was something sitting inside waiting to pounce. The 2 side sections must have been meant for smaller species. To the left were doors ranging from my height to about the height of a wolf, while the other section had much smaller ones, mostly for rodents or other small species. It made sense to segregate by species, so that during busy times the smaller ones wouldn't get trampled by the larger mammals. I decided to take my chances on the left. Since the right entrances were too small, and the large doors in the middle would have probably attracted too much attention if they were suddenly opened. Okay, Onion. There's nothing on sensors yet, but be ready. If we suddenly find ourselves in another ghoul nest, I'm closing the door, barricading it, and we will go far, far away and never return again. I am sick of trying to outrun a pack of creatures trying to eat my flesh.
Shouldn't I go first, miss?
I don't want to risk losing you again. Back at the theater when I saw you, I almost lost it.
To be fair, miss, if you didn't start blindly throwing grenades, we wouldn't have been in that predicament.
How many times do I have to say I'm sorry? Anyway, if I didn't do that, we probably wouldn't be standing here talking about it now, would we? Let's just get this over with. There was no visible handle on the door. Please let it not be mechanical. I highly doubt there would be any power to control them. I put my paw on it and gave a slight push. The door moved a few inches. I pulled back my paw and it closed on its own. Must have been spring-operated. That might explain why they were all closed and still in fairly good condition. I took a deep breath, held it in, and put my paw back on the door and pushed again. The door showed little resistance as it opened inward. Since I could only see this one side of the station, I didn't know exactly what to expect. The inside was brightly lit. There were no artificial lights, but rather the other side had 2 arched openings that led back outside. There were 6 rows of seats that were arranged facing towards the openings. Between the openings was a small room with 2 open windows, one facing inwards and the other was facing outwards. Above the windows were 2 small faded signs, but I wasn't able to make out what it said. The room was only large enough for 1 occupant, but I could see a terminal screen inside. A wall divided the section from a larger middle section, with only a wolf-sized doorway leading towards the larger area. There were machines covering the rest of the wall, alternating between tall and short. Each one had a small screen on it. A large sign hung on the wall that said tickets. On the other wall were 3 machines, with a sign on the wall that said vending. The glass fronts on all of them had been shattered. I saw a few discarded snack wrappers and empty bottles scattered around. Damn, of course they were picked clean. Luck was on my side. Despite a few skeletal remains, there was no impending doom. I still remained cautious, however. There were still 2 more areas that could be occupied. I moved as quietly as possible, even though I saw no threats on my Pip-Boar. I went to where the small room was. There was a door on the side, the only means of entering and exiting. But unlike the main entrance, this had a handle, and it was also locked. I still had a couple of those metal antennas, so I decided to try to pick the lock. It had been a while, so hopefully I hadn't gotten rusty. Can you get rusty on something you've only done a few times? I placed the flat tip of my screwdriver in and then positioned the thin piece of metal. I felt resistance immediately and stopped before I snapped it. The opposite direction was a bit smoother. It took me a few attempts, but I finally met with a satisfying clicking noise. I put my tools away and opened the door. Since there were the 2 open windows, I didn't have to worry about any surprises. But I still did get a shock. Resting against the door was a skeleton about my height. It was wearing a simple-looking uniform, but it had deteriorated over time. Poor thing must have been working when the bombs fell. There was nothing I could do about the body, so I stepped over it and looked at the terminal. It was a basic computer screen with a keyboard attached to a movable monitor. I couldn't see where the actual computer was housed at, but there was a small red light next to the terminal. Did it still have power? I decided against my better judgment that there was only one way to find out. I pushed it. A faint humming noise started up, and there was a quiet beeping noise. The monitor lit up, but I had to wipe off the dust for it to be visible. The loading screen showed the letters ZTA in a red circle with the words Zootopia Transit Authority below it. After a moment where the screen flickered on and off, it began to boot into a graphical interface with the ZTA symbol in the upper corner. In the middle of the screen, it prompted me for a username and a password. Fuck.
What is it, miss?
An old pre-war terminal, and surprisingly it still has power after 200 years.
Anything useful on it, miss?
Well, that's the thing. It's asking me for a username and password.
What about your hacking program, miss? I know these systems are ancient, but can your Pip-Boar still interface with them?
Well, there's one way to find out. I lifted up my arm with the Pip-Boar and sat it on the desk with the terminal. I pulled the connecting cable from it and looked for a place to interface. I don't know if I got lucky or if it was just a standard way to interface, but there was a port that my cable was able to connect with. Once it hooked up, I activated my Hacktron program. While the interfaces were compatible, all the terminals that I had accessed so far were based upon Burrow Tech environments. This system, however, must have predated it since there was no compatible backdoor subroutine available to me. Looks like I'll have to do this one the hard way. I set my Hacktron program into manual mode and was greeted by a series of jumbled letters, numbers, and symbols. I remember having to use this once before. My mother had found an old portable computer somewhere in the Burrow, and like this, the operating system predated the Burrow tech design, so I wasn't able to directly connect to it. I spent nearly a month creating a specialized subroutine that would access the archaic system, but it wasn't very clean. Apparently these old systems created dummy codes that would cycle in with the valid code, meaning I had a half-dozen different passwords presented to me in a jumbled mess, but only one of them was correct. Burrowtech systems were pretty hard to crack, but at least my Pip-Boy was able to filter out all the junk and make it easier for me. I didn't have a username, but thankfully all those were stored locally and unencrypted. I chose one at random and started my task of filtering out any potential password. The first one was a failure. Figures. I wouldn't be that lucky. I was startled when a message popped up on the terminal. Wrong password entered, please try again. Yeah, I kinda figured that out, computer. I tried another one and failed that one as well. Another message popped up on the screen. Wrong password entered. One more incorrect password will result in a system lockout. System lockout? Figures it wouldn't be that easy. 2 passwords were eliminated, but there were still 10 potential ones to go. I need to find a better way of doing this. I exited my hack and opened up my program editor. I messed around with my Hacktron code, altering a few lines as well as adding a couple. It's a good thing that I was a whiz at this, otherwise I'd be here all night. It took about 15 minutes. All that time Onion was complaining about how we had stayed far longer than he had hoped, but I had my mind set on cracking this thing. Once I was done, I closed the editor and reconnected the program to the terminal. I selected a new username, hoping it would reset my lockout attempts, and tried again. The same jumble of words, numbers, and symbols appeared. But I noticed that not only were the passwords different, they were shorter. The other passwords were 10 letters long, but these were only 5. I selected one, pizza, probably because I was starting to get hungry again. And it was a failure. But thankfully there was no lockout message, so it must have counted this as my first attempt. This was where my editor code kicked in. While I couldn't tell it to just give me the password, it was able to at least tell me how close I was using a comparative algorithm. It said that 2 out of the 5 letters had matched. Let's see, Jumpy? No, that one wouldn't match. How about Jiffy? Well, the I matched, but it said I had 2 matches. And there's only one here. Wait, what about the second one? How about Fuzzy? 2 Z's match. Only one way to find out. I selected that one and I was in. Once I had full access to the terminal, I was presented with a bunch of different options. There was one for purchasing and redeeming tickets, another for reporting suspect activity, and some I was not sure of. But then I saw what I wanted. Transit map. I opened it up and was presented with an interactive map of Zootopia. It had no details, it simply showed the 4 districts, separated by color. Black lines intersecting throughout the entire map. And every so often there was a small white dot. And one of them was flashing. It was labeled Grass Street Station. Oh, that's us. I tapped the name on the screen and every line connected here lit up. There were 2 lines connected to this station, the Animalia line and the Burrow line. The Animalia line branched off north and south, so that one was out. But the Burrow line seemed to go in a huge circle, traveling through all 4 districts. One end traveled off the local map, but the other end cut off at Savannah Central Station. Hey, Onion.
Yes, miss?
Savannah Central Station. That sounds familiar. Ring any bells?
Actually, it does, miss. Prior to the Steel Guardians updating our maps with current landmarks, there was a Savannah Central Station.
Can you send its location to my Pip-Boy?
Right away, miss.
I exited the program and pulled up the map. Everything was the same except for one area. The location that Onion sent me overlapped with the location that the Guardians added to it. It kept flashing with alternative titles. First it flashed Savannah Central Station, then Hope. The train tracks would lead us straight to the town of Hope. Hope. It was a word that brought feelings of expectation and trust. Such a simple word can bring on such emotions and can help unite people together in a time of peril. So far I've seen mammals turn against each other, committing acts of such depravity with so little effort. This world needed a feeling of hope. Something greater than what it's given its people already. I'm just afraid that hope might turn into be a fallacy, or worse, end up just like Beaverton.
Miss, you look unhappy.
It's not that I'm unhappy. It's just that... What happens if we finally arrive at Hope and it's not what we were expecting? I also keep thinking of Beaverton. What if Hope ends up to be another victim of those rednecks? We don't even know who they are or how far they've spread. For all we know, it's another city suffering the same horrible fate.
Miss, you should not dwell on the unknown. You need to focus on a singular goal, and that goal is reaching the town of Hope. If you keep thinking of everything else, we may never make it. We almost didn't make it when you decided to rescue Chief Laszlo.
Well, to be fair, Onion, we did make some friends, and powerful ones at that.
Powerful, miss. Highly trained soldiers that were kept at bay by some thugs. I wouldn't call that powerful.
They had a missile launcher. I don't care how highly trained you are, a missile to the face negates everything.
Well, I for one believe you should have taken their offer, miss. Like you said, who knows what condition this Hope is even in. At least we know that place was safe.
Yeah, but I want to help. I don't think my skills would have been maximized there. Everything seemed too well-oiled, which means that they probably had a skilled technician already. You really think that they would let me, someone who knows zip about Guardian technology, try my paw at fixing it? No, Onion. I need to find a place that needs my help.
You want someplace broken.
Exactly. I really should be concerned more about my own safety. Onion was right about one thing. I do get too distracted when I think someone needs my help. What he doesn't understand is that unless I put myself out there, I don't know if I'll ever find a place in this world. Sure, Hope could be a bust. They might have some fantastic engineer keeping the place in tip-top shape, and they have no need for someone like me. But if I simply went from point A straight to point C, I might skip my destiny at point B. No, I won't rest until I find where I belong, even if that takes me to the far ends of the world.